New Deal for Contra Costa Symposium. Thank you for participating in this conversation amongst city leaders, city staff of Contra Costa's municipalities about this very essential issue, the most essential issue of our time, the issue of climate change. And the conversation about how our communities, our businesses, our governments must adapt and innovate and transition to a green economy, and how Contra Costa cities must be the leader on this issue. My name is Mark Van Landuit with Sierra Club Mount Diablo, Our Revolution Contra Costa, Generation Green, Contra Costa Climate Leaders. And again, thank you for joining us this morning. And I guess I'm going to start with some quick basics on the lexicon that we're using for this morning. What is a Green New Deal? Well, we don't really know yet. It's up to all of us to create that Green New Deal. It is an idea, it's a vision. And invoking FDR's New Deal of 1932, the New Deal that lifted America out of the Great Depression, it gives the proper size, the sense of proportion that is needed for the mobilization, for the courage, the people power, and the policy smarts that it's going to take to meet today's greatest challenge, the clear and present danger of climate change. And also invoking the New Deal is proper because we're also talking about jobs. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about how clean energy jobs are the future of California, are the future of Contra Costa and the Bay Area. And in that light, the Green New Deal is mostly used as a title. When I was a policy advisor for Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, we actually had Green New Deal in our campaign platform way back in 2008. And you fast forward so many years, and the idea of a Green New Deal remains a compelling and inspiring vision for young people, for young voters, for activists. But ultimately, the name is less important than the vision and the policy that we're going to be forwarding. And this is an important discussion to have, because if last year was any indication, this upcoming summer is going to be brutal. If you remember last year's wildfires that turned our skies into an apocalyptic crimson, about threatening drought, power outages, the threat of sea rise, and also everything that's unforeseeable, the economic consequences of global events like conflicts in the Middle East. Extreme weather costs us billions of dollars every year in damages to our communities, to our businesses, and worst of all, the cost to human life. And so it's important for us to be talking about these things and thinking about these things, and why your leadership is so important. The longer we wait, the harder this is all going to be. And we are in a historic moment of opportunity. We have President Biden's infrastructure plan, which is on the horizon. Gavin Newsom has just launched major explorative programs for a green transition. He's already offering a lot of bold programs for green infrastructure. So our cities must be creating those shovel-ready projects now. And it's imperative that Contra Costa cities are part of that conversation, and it's imperative that Contra Costa cities are leading the conversation. And so with that, I am going to quickly bring up to speak on that facet. She is founder of the sustainability firm Appraisal. She's worked with Alameda County, she's worked with NASA, she's worked with US House members. She is one of the smartest policy thinkers I know, and she's author of this fine book, which I just had by my side a minute ago, called The Great Pivot. Oh my goodness. It's a great book. It never collects dust on my shelf. She is our friend. She's our colleague. Please welcome Justine Burt. Justine.
Thank you so much, Mark. I want to give a little context in terms of federal, state, and local government and their roles to play. Everyone's familiar with the Green New Deal resolution that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey introduced in early 2019. And right after it was introduced, I got a chance to talk to one of AOC's legislative aides, Randy, and I said, Randy, the Green New Deal resolution is only 14 pages long. What's the deal with it? It doesn't have a lot of details. It just paints this broad framework. Was the intent to just start the conversation and then we all get to talk about what we want the details to be? And he said, exactly. You all might have noticed that last month, Representative Cori Bush and AOC introduced the Green New Deal for Cities Act of 2021. And if you haven't heard of this, you're going to be excited about it. And I encourage you to lobby for it because it says we want to invest $1 trillion over 4 years in green jobs and decarbonizing our society. And this act is for cities, counties, tribes, and territory. So that's potentially really exciting. At the state level, Todd Gloria introduced a Green New Deal resolution in 2019, which passed. And then last year, Rob Bonta introduced the Economic, Environmental, and Social Recovery COVID Act, which actually died in the Natural Resources Committee. So there's been all this activity at the federal level, at the state level, but really local government is where things happen. That's where the rubber meets the road. You all are in a position to put in protected bike lanes and electric vehicle charging infrastructure, community choice energy, composting programs, urban forestry, the projects that will either reduce greenhouse gases or sequester carbon. So as I was writing The Great Pivot, I kept thinking, well, we know what the private sector does well, and we know what the nonprofit sector does well, but what do we really need government to do that no one else will do? And I came up with 3 things. We need government to set goals. We need government to implement ordinances and resolutions. And perhaps most importantly, levy and disperse fees to reduce pollution, to build things in a more sustainable way. For example, the city of Palo Alto charges for monthly parking passes and then uses a portion of that revenue to pay for free transit passes for low-wage service sector workers. That's an example of levying and dispersing fees. And so just to wrap up, local government is, if you're wondering, how do we do social equity? How do we work on the social equity piece? Think about the low-income communities that are living right near power plants, oil refineries, highways, airports, shipping ports, landfills, agricultural fields, confined animal feeding operations. When we transition to clean energy, to electric transportation, when we prevent waste, reduce food waste, restore nature, we're helping these frontline communities who are bearing the burden disproportionately of pollution and will be on the front lines of climate change. So this is how we create more equitable and resilient future for all. And with that, I turn it back to Mark.
Thank you, Justine. And I will take a moment to plug her book, The Great Pivot, this marvelous tome. All right. And thank you for that. You brought up the Green New Deal for cities that was proposed by Representatives Bush and Ocasio-Cortez. I was very pleased to see that a piece of legislation is serious when they have funding, when they're talking about funding. So I was pleased to see that. We always say, listen to the science. And that means we have to listen to the scientists. And I'm going to bring up a wonderful environmental scientist who works with McGill University. Her work is mostly in water. She is co-founder of Frontline Catalysts, which is a new organization working to empower youth, particularly here in the Bay Area, setting up environmental curriculums for Bay Area schools. Not only is she a great scientist, but she's also a great organizer. And she is one of the reasons why today's event is a success. Please welcome Dr. Wietske Medema. Dr. Wietske.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that intro. You are a wonderful ally, and everybody here, so happy that you were able to join us. We know that city officials are busy and that your time is limited. And we actually want to give you one less thing to do. We want this to be easy for you. So a coalition of environmental scientists, policymakers, activists, and concerned citizens have drafted up something, a municipal Green New Deal or a municipal Green Economic Recovery Act. And we're really excited to share this document with you. It could just as easily be called the Martinez Green New Deal or the Antioch Green Economic Recovery Act. And it's a legislative plan filled with important and innovative programs that cities can implement today. Of course, every city is different and every city has different needs, but every city is going to be facing the same climate emergency. And the municipal Green New Deal proposal is filled with ideas that you and your city can adapt. Ideas that can inspire other programs that your city needs. As Justine mentioned so well, it is city and county governments that are in the unique position to address social equity because you can help allocate resources. And in this light, it is also essential that cities start thinking about how to elevate the voices of young people, of young voters. Climate change is their top priority and their top concern. Our world had burned 40 gigatons of greenhouse gases in 2019 alone. And studies have shown, studies show that we have a budget of about 500 gigatons of greenhouse gases if we want to keep the climate stable. There are 3,000 gigatons of greenhouse gases in the fossil fuels in the ground that if we burn would mean game over for our planet. This makes the next 10 years critically important. Decarbonize our energy and transportation systems, form more resilient agricultural systems, improve the health of our forests and waterways, and create a circular economy. It's all connected, and cities and counties play a vital role in this. The good news is that with plans like the Municipal Green New Deal, with organizations like Contra Costa County Climate Leaders and the Sharer Club and Generation Green, and being here in dialogue with your fellow cities, you are really never alone. We are here to advocate with you, and we are here to be climate champions with you. And we thank you all for being here and for your concern and your curiosity and your commitment to the most important issue, important of all issues, the future of our communities and of our planet. So I'm handing the mic back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Wietske. And I like hearing those words. You are never alone. And all of you are never alone in this struggle, in this fight. That's a great thing that's a great thing for anybody on any issue. So let's get into it. We have so much to talk about. We have so much to learn from each other. We have so much to do. And we have an incredible lineup of speakers. And I have the unenviable task of being timekeeper, but I have the very enviable task of introducing them. Our first speaker, I'm very excited. I know his schedule for today is really packed, so we're very pleased that he made time. In the year that the previous White House administration had the United States leave the Paris Agreement, the city of San Jose responded with passing a very bold initiative called the San Jose Climate Smart. And our next speaker was instrumental in that accomplishment. And we're going to have him talk about the formation of Climate Smart San Jose and about the successes and challenges of implementing this initiative. We're very pleased to have with us San Jose Council Member from District 3. Please welcome Raul Perales. Councilmember Perales.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, Mark, and everybody who's with us today. As Mark said, my name is Raul Perales, and I am the council member for the city of San Jose representing the downtown core. And in the fall of 2015, I attended a United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Summit in New York City. That was my first year as a council member. And I was there able to represent the city of San Jose. Our mayor was unable to attend. And I really came back extremely energized and began to help lead on the formation of this climate smart plan. And I've been proud to help lead the city in achieving our plan, which culminated in a 290-page document, which I will actually share a link to in the chat after I'm done presenting. And I'm going to try to provide a brief synopsis of that today, and then be able to answer some Q&A. So the city of San Jose has been at the forefront of fighting climate change in the Bay Area, beginning over a decade ago, actually, as San Jose City Hall became the first city hall in the nation to achieve LEED Platinum certification. That's the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design certification. And we established our Green Vision Plan at that time, which was a 15-year sustainability plan to steer economic growth and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But it was really an internal looking document just on city infrastructure, city-owned infrastructure. This work, as I stated, shifted as we began to create our Climate Smart Plan in 2018 with goals such as being the first city to produce a gigawatt of solar power by 2040 and reducing our carbon emissions by 1 million tons a year. And we know of the inevitable. Certainly, if we do not continue to seek innovative and sustainable solutions to protect our future for all of our families and our communities. Since launching Climate Smart San Jose in February 2018, the city of San Jose has been leading the charge to reduce air pollution, conserve water, and create a stronger and healthier community. This plan has begun to spur new policies and innovative techniques for reducing environmental impacts all across our city. And prior to the adoption of the plan, our city staff did extensive community engagement, which took actually over 2 years to complete, to ensure that we involved the community in this process. And as Mark was stating, including the scientists, the individuals with expertise, but also individuals like our youth, people that may not have that educational expertise, but have a vision for what kind of world they'd like to live in the future. And because of this, the support for Climate Smart did not come just when the memo was published. Rather, it was the engagement of staff with countless environmental and advocacy groups that got that final document approved. And during the development process, efforts included things like engagement over 100 technical experts from businesses, non-governmental agencies, local, state government, academia for guidance, obviously in the areas of energy, water, mobility, land use, and open space. A survey that we conducted with over 2,000 survey respondents and over 1,800 ideas being submitted. And we did presentations and gathering of the public to gather input at community meetings, including city council study sessions, town hall meetings, our youth commission, you name it, across the board. The continued engagement ensured that our community was in step with our city and very knowledgeable and aware of this plan as we were developing it. Since the city has adopted the Climate Smart Plan in 2018, there have been some significant progress that we've made and has helped guide us in many of the council policies we've moved forward with on the last few years. I'll list a couple of these successes here. So following the plan, the city launched San Jose Clean Energy in 2018 and expanded to serve most of our residents and businesses in 2019. It now serves over 345,000 customers and is the largest single jurisdiction community choice aggregation in the United States. San Jose Clean Energy default, our default source called Green Source service is 40% renewable and up to 92% carbon free. And our top end Total Green, which I am a personal customer of by choice, is an agreement of 100% renewable energy that our customers get to choose. We launched a community solar program for disadvantaged communities that would help provide discounts for up to 20% to low-income residents to receive access to community solar. Also in 2018, our voters passed a measure allowing for the city to finish our conversion of our city street lights to LED lights to complete that by 2022, further adding to more energy savings and greenhouse gas emissions. In that same year, 2018, at the end of the year, we were one of 20 cities selected by the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge, which awarded us $2.5 million, a grant that will conclude this June to continue along with some of this work we were doing. In 2019, the San Jose approved a building REACH code for all new construction that would encourage all electric buildings. We also recently passed a natural gas prohibition ordinance in all low-rise residential buildings and all electric including an all-electric building policy. Starting in August of last year, 2021, or excuse me, of this year, 2021, all new construction buildings will be prohibited in using natural gas infrastructure with just a few exemptions. We are exploring how to encourage more usage of public transportation, bike riding, and other multimodal modes of transportation, and obviously in the attempt to lessen the number of cars that are being utilized throughout the city. And in that, we've implemented our Better Bikeways project to incentivize that multimodal use. We approved a shared micro mobility program. And if a car must be used, we obviously encourage our residents to purchase electric vehicles. And we're doing so by incentivizing them and requiring more electric vehicle parking stations, including within our own infrastructure. From 2017 to 19, we saw a 9% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in our transportation sector and a 1% unfortunate increase in our building sector, but an 8% reduction in our solid waste sector. And again, this was 2017 to 19. So this is where our building sector and moving to all electric is really going to make a difference, I believe, over the next few years. We will continue to set ambitious goals to continue to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And in just 3 short years, our city has made some great strides, but I know there's obviously much more to be done. San Jose remains committed to preserving our environment by reducing our production of greenhouse gas emissions in the city of San Jose by thinking innovatively and strategically. And I thank you all for inviting me, for indulging me to be able to share a little bit about our plan. It's been great work that we've been doing, and I look forward to joining in with more cities all around the Bay Area, the state, and in our nation to help lead the way.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Perales.
And while we go to the questions, I'm going to share those links in the link in the chat.
Fantastic. And Climate Smart San Jose was inspirational to a lot of communities around the country. So thank you for being a leader on that. Since our time with the council member is limited, we're going to go for a round of questions. If anyone has questions for Councilmember Perales, go ahead and raise your hand. If you're new to Zoom, look at the function at the bottom of your Zoom window under reactions. Go ahead and click on reactions, and you should see a tab. Amongst them is the raise hand function. So if you go ahead and do that, and I will call upon you.
And I've shared 2 links in there. One is the 290-page document, and then the other is a much more brief synopsis, 22-page report from our city that was just provided actually on Tuesday of this week on an update. So
I'm a big fan of cheat sheets, so I'll be clicking on the second link first, and for some light weekend reading, I will look through the entire plan. We have a question from Linda Deschambault. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you for that presentation. I actually had a question. Has the city of San Jose considered formalizing, as I think we'll hear later, Chico has an actual document, a Green New Deal that they've been working on and other cities have. Is San Jose looking at doing a all-encompassing sort of Green New Deal, and what would be the benefits of doing that?
So we haven't had those exact discussions, but our plan is not, believe it or not, right, is now in need of an update because it's aging of 5 years now, and so as we've begun the work on it, so oddly enough, right, it's already become outdated, and so we discussed that on Tuesday. Actually, the work will need to begin to update this plan. And I think that's where we're going to see it begin to shift, as we've seen, right, these conversations over the last couple of years, and begin to incorporate even broader ideas. And so that would be the work that we're going to endeavor on, next. And that's always the case as you come out, I think, early on some of these efforts and plans. I think you can help lead the way, but then a few years later, you find yourself really at the end of the pack, because people have sort of learned and new ideas have come forward. So then you gotta bring it forward again and update it. And so that's what we'll be engaging in shortly.
There's another question from our friend Susanna Mayer from Brentwood.
Hi, council member. Thank you so much for that great presentation. It was really inspiring. I was hoping you could touch a little bit on the environmental justice and equity part of the plan. Tell us a little bit more about how you focused on that.
Yeah, so, and actually I had this very same question on Tuesday to our staff, because I reread the 290-page document before our Tuesday, and I'll give you a good warning. There are a lot of slides and screens and graphics, so it's not all it's not all reading. But I looked it back over, and the word equity only exists once in a slide in the 290 pages, and it was actually in a slide in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. It wasn't necessarily within our own plan. And again, this was developed, 5 years ago, and that conversation was not at the forefront, and unfortunately had not entered into, how would we incorporate that sort of that equity lens on all of this work that we're looking at. And so I had that conversation, and actually that was the response from our staff. Was they said, look, this is exactly where we're going to need to go as we grow this plan and move into the next phase. And so it's actually, as you read through it, you look through it, and that might be something that shocks you as well. So, wow, that's not necessarily a core focus of this plan, but it should be. And we had a lengthy discussion about it on Tuesday, because, for instance, one of the things that that was not a priority through our climate smart plan was the planting of new trees, even mature trees, in the community. We have policies, right, that require us to, as trees are removed, that we have to replant new trees. So that's there, but it wasn't necessarily in the climate smart plan. It wasn't called out as a high priority because of the fact that it takes maybe 30 years for a tree to mature, or even longer. And so if we want to make quicker impact sooner, we're going to have to focus on other things. Well, it was brought up by my colleague from East San Jose, where their tree canopy is terrible, and it's one of the lower income areas of our city. And what we said, the discussion was, if we had incorporated equity into this conversation, we might not have only looked for sort of the biggest bang for our buck kind of items, but we would have said, maybe there's some things that we need to incorporate that are really going to address some of these really low income communities that have been overlooked, that we know have borne the brunt of this pandemic, and just through history have faced those challenges. And so it will be a much broader focus, but unfortunately, like I said, you'll read the 290-page document, you're not going to see that in there.
And I will read it. Thank you.
Very good. Is there any more questions for the council member? If the raise hand function defeats you, go ahead and be on camera and wave wildly into the camera. Council member, thank you so much. As I said, your schedule is pretty full, and I imagine it's going to get even more full in the upcoming weeks and days. Really thank you for your time, and thank you for that rundown about all the opportunities and challenges that are facing San Jose. And thank you for your part in setting San Jose's future. Thank you for being here, council member.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Appreciate being able to partake, and thank you for coordinating this and having this discussion. Thank
you so much. Well, our next speaker is a joy for me to introduce every time I'm able to do so. She, as two-term elected mayor of the city of Richmond, she helped lead the city's social and economic renaissance. She's one of the co-founders of the Richmond Progressive Alliance. And I dare say, when the histories of the new American progressive movement are written, huge chapters are going to be devoted to her and the Richmond Progressive Alliance. She is City Council member for the City of Richmond, District 5. She is the one and only Gail McLaughlin. Councilmember Gail.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for that very kind introduction. As stated, I'm Gail McLaughlin, and I'm a council member in Richmond, California, and I have had a long history with helping to push the envelope toward a greener and more sustainable Richmond over the recent decade and a half. The 8 years I served as Richmond's elected mayor gave me the opportunity to set a tone for the city, and that work has continued into the future. Before I talk about some of the many policies and programs we have put into effect in Richmond, I want to share just a few thoughts about the big picture we all face in this climate emergency. So I want to share a short paragraph from an article by U.S. retired astronaut Scott Kelly, who is a veteran of 4 space flights. Here is what he says. When you look at Earth from space, you realize just how vulnerable life is on this planet. The atmosphere is incredibly thin and fragile looking, almost like a contact lens on someone's eye. During my first mission in 1999 to fix the Hubble Space Telescope, I remember passing over South America and being awed by the sheer size of the Amazon rainforest. On my last mission in 2016, only 17 years later, burning and clear cutting was clearly evident. After seeing the Earth dramatically change from this unique perspective, I firmly believe that solving climate change is the moonshot of the 21st century. Many of the tools and resources that I used on my missions, such as solar panels and rechargeable storage batteries, are also the answer to our problems on Earth. So as Scott Kelly rightly states, solving climate change is our 21st century moonshot. His words remind me of the delicate balance of our ecosystem and also of the uncertainty of our future. We can and must tackle this climate emergency that requires us to keep pushing forward, even among many uncertainties and into unknown territory. Will we succeed in preventing further damage and reversing course toward a sustainable planet? I think the verdict is still out on that, but I am very optimistic. Efforts like this symposium and all the work that everyone is doing in their cities give me hope. Now, Richmond is no stranger to challenges. We are a working class community that has lived with a giant oil refinery since we incorporated as a city in the early 1900s, sorry. I always talk about how in Richmond, we have a double task. One is to hold this giant oil behemoth accountable to our community that has suffered the impact of its pollution, fires, spills, and explosions for over 100 years. And 2, to build up a truly and sustainable city with strong, green, healthy policies and programs. So here are some of our accomplishments. Now this is an accomplishment of an electoral race. We defeated Chevron's $3.5 million attempt to buy local elections. That's an accomplishment because it allows us to do the work when we defeat Chevron's candidates. We also redefined Chevron's tax, $114 million in additional taxes in 15 years. We also redefined its environmental obligations. We filed a lawsuit and we won a settlement against Chevron for its abuses and damages to Richmond residents. And we are a part of a choice aggregation energy program, in which our residents and businesses are getting greener and cleaner electricity. Our city buildings are included and they get 100% of their electricity from renewable sources. We created a nationally acclaimed green jobs training program, leading the Bay Area in solar installations per capita in 2010. Our focus on solar also included a rebate for residents who put solar on their rooftops if and only if they use graduates from our solar installation program. In this way, we became a greener city, but also put dollars in the hands of our green job training graduates. We also got an agreement from Chevron using our city permitting power to require them as a condition of their 2014 modernization project to put up a huge solar array on their property through Marin Clean Energy, which is the community choice aggregation program. Other things we have done include advancing a local climate action plan, a moratorium on pesticide use, including banning glyphosate, a green building ordinance, a plastic bag ban, a styrofoam ban, bicycle paths, urban agriculture. We have a beautiful pedestrian and bike path called the Richmond Greenway with urban gardens, and we planted trees, more trees, and we need even more throughout our city. More recently, we have an ordinance to ban shipping coal through our city in a multi-year phased approach. But we have a lot left to do. Ultimately, we need a comprehensive Green New Deal to transition the economy from fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy. And I believe that only by building working class power and waging struggle from below can we save the planet. Climate change is a class problem, and climate solutions need to appeal to the material interests of the working class and communities of color. Science is key, but not enough. Beyond educational campaigns, we need an actual struggle to wrest power away from the fossil fuel industry. The rich and the corporations need to be defined as the enemy of the planet and our climate, and they need to be heavily taxed to pay for the transition. While cities are in the lead on this, we need the whole world to be in solidarity, working together for this transition to succeed. Now, looking into the future locally, I want to see the expansion of Richmond's Green Job Training Program and the expansion of our policies and regulations in a green and clean regulatory way. I have been working on promoting a sustainable future for Point Melati and the toxic AstraZeneca site. And in all our developments on the shoreline, we must look at sea level rise. The predictions for sea level rise are growing rapidly. We need to preserve our shoreline as a living shoreline and not allow bad developments which harm the community and our environment and create more economic problems. The environment and the economy are intertwined. Harming the environment with bad development not only puts health and safety at risk, but when we disregard impacts to the environment, we end up costing cities and other entities massive amounts of money to clean things up. And someday there will be no amount of money that can and will save us from environmental destruction unless we start embracing the environment, a healthy environment today. I've been engaged with environmental groups to demand that Chevron begin shifting away from fossil fuel development and clean up its site with local workers trained in hazmat cleanup. We know that Chevron must begin decommissioning its refinery eventually, and we think they should be starting now. We don't want to be taken by surprise when they up and walk away from our city. We want them to do a phased out approach over a just transition over 10 to 15 years, with them reducing their refining capacity each year. And simultaneously, we want them to pay into a Richmond fund so we aren't left with a big gap in our local tax base. We think such a fund is owed our community that has lived in the shadow of this major corporation and suffered the health and safety impact for more than a century. Communities for a Better Environment is working on this, and I'm right there with them. Simultaneously, with pushing Chevron to decommission, we need to continue to diversify our economy with more green, clean businesses. I continue to stand in solidarity side by side with all community groups to strengthen our pathway toward a more sustainable Richmond. Tomorrow, I will be right there in the front lines of confronting Chevron at the refinery, as I have done many times before, as I participate with many in this global anti-Chevron day, where we are mobilizing against their greed, pollution, and human rights violations. This is indeed a global struggle. I went to Ecuador in 2013 and saw for myself the impact on the Amazon rainforest, which Chevron is responsible for cleaning up. The fossil fuel industry must be reined in, or our future and that of our children and grandchildren will remain in jeopardy. So let me close by saying what the award-winning Canadian journalist, international activist, and best-selling author Naomi Klein has said in depicting climate change as more than an issue. She states, and I quote, "It is a civilizational wake-up call, a powerful message spoken in the language of fires, floods, droughts, and extinctions, telling us that we need an entirely new economic model and a new way of sharing this planet." So my final words will be to all of us to let's continue to rise up, wake up, stand up tall, and be creative and continue to hold wonderful symposiums like this one. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words with all of you today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gail McLaughlin. Wonderful symposiums with wonderful participants like you. And thank you for what you said about taking the globalist view. What we do here in California does affect communities in South America, just as what happens in South America affects us here in California. Also, apart from that electrifying list of accomplishments that the city of Richmond has done, the conversation about a just transition was very inspiring. Just as 2019 was sort of the year of the Green New Deal, 2021 must be the year of a just transition. And I thank you, Gail, for starting that conversation in the shadow of the Chevron refineries. So important. Since we're doing so good on time, I was just wondering, is there any questions for Councilmember Gail McLaughlin by chance? And if not, that's all right. Shy crowd. All right, that's all right. We're going to be having a larger roundtable discussion a little bit later. Well, that gives me the opportunity to move. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail, so much. Our next speaker. Earlier, I was talking about how municipal Green New Deal, the Green New Deal, the conversations around that. We're talking about creating the economy of the future. And that means coordinating every part of our communities, to not just to the people, the non-government organizations, businesses. The next speaker, he was planning commissioner for the city of Pinole, and he is a real visionary. And he's one of the people that I go to for, he is a fireworks display of ideas every time I speak. And he is recently elected city councilor for the city of Pinole. He is someone I can't wait for you to hear and meet if you haven't heard him before. He is our friend. He is our champion. City councilor for the city of Pinole. Please welcome Devin Murphy. Devin.
Thank you so much, Mark and Dr. Witzke and Linda and Justine for being here. I totally forgot that I was going after Councilmember McLaughlin. I can't beat you. It's over. You won. Thank you so much. Brilliant. You are so much more.
And this together.
We truly are. And your words said so much and gave me so much inspiration for my talk. And honestly, you know, I really value this symposium for a number of reasons. First and foremost, so those of you who don't know me, my name is Devin Murphy. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a freshman counselor for the city of Pinole. As Mark said, I'm a former planning commissioner. And while I feel like a lot of folks who spoke before me I was inspired and I've been inspired for this last 45 minutes. I'm actually, I want to speak to those of you who are like me. Those of you who are new council members, those of you who are new to public policy, public service, those of you who care about the environment, those of you who are you stepped in on your first day at city council and they sent you a binder and all of this reading to do, and it took you 3 months to get ahead because there's so much reading. Those of you who see a 200-page document and say, I have a full-time job, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I want to address climate change. I want to make an impact. I want to be here. I'm speaking to you all. And just so we're clear, I'm also speaking to those of you who have been here for a long time in this work. And I really want to honor folks like, again, Councilor McLaughlin, for your work and your service and your tremendous leadership that is rooted in courage and environmental justice, because like I said, you set the tone and you certainly are allowing me to stand on your shoulders to try to get Pinole to the right place. So just wanted to say thank you on that. But I also want to speak to something that I feel like, or someone who is not here. And that's business owners. That's our small business community. That's our, we call them corporations sometimes in our business community, right? These are groups who are certainly a part of the culture, not just of our community, but of fighting climate change. If you are a business owner, because I don't know this, I know this conversation is geared towards, elected officials. I'd like you to write in the chat box that you are. It'd be nice to know our community. It'd be nice to know if you're someone like me. A lot of folks don't know I am a small business owner. And while I love public policy and I love this work of service, day to day as a business owner, my hope is to also help other business owners both scale their business, but also to think about climate in a more intersectional approach. So I'd love to know the community out there, and I think we all would love to know as we think about this conversation for the next few minutes. So as some folks have said, the business community is actually critical to climate change, to fighting climate change and advancing what we see as clean energy, right? In 2017, The Guardian wrote that actually the top 100 fossil fuel companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. I'm going to say that again. 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. Now, we can take this in two approaches. We can sit here and say, forget those companies, we don't want to work with them. Or we can take a different approach that says, let's find an opportunity to hold these companies accountable while working to build a better future for everyone. And the next couple of minutes, I do want to just talk about the role of community-based public-private partnerships. Once again, that's community-based public-private partnerships. And Mark, if you can you just add me as a co-host? I just want to show one slide just for folks to see a visual as to what I'm talking about. But in the meantime, just for a definition, a community-based public-private partnership is between a local government and a private entity. The primary goal of this partnership is a few things. Number one, it's to really provide flexibility for us. I come from a community that has about 20,000 people. Our city staff is not large. We don't have a sustainability officer, for example. We don't have someone committed to climate resiliency in our town. Now, do we have people who care about this issue? Absolutely. But providing flexibility is critical for small cities like mine and probably yours. Providing access to advanced technology, right? Thinking about new innovation, we're in 2021, and how we can use technology is really critical to advancing our fight to combat climate change and the climate crisis. And so when we work with private companies, we oftentimes have a more accessible approach to this new technology. Addressing dynamic community development trends and goals, right? This is the crux of our municipalities, right? And knowing our people, who they are, what they like to do. And again, that community-based approach is critical, right? To understanding the trends. Excuse me, I'm just going to share the screen so you all see what I'm talking about a little bit more. But lastly, it's critical that we also encourage long-term financial and regulatory commitments for integrating green technology at all costs, right? We want to make sure that our focus is not just on, a short-term project that gets funding for a private company, although that's what the business owner may be there for, right? Our job as public servants is to ensure that long-term financial and regulatory commitments are made. And so that's the importance of community-based private partnerships. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, I want to do so much. I want my city to be the Green New Deal city of Contra Costa County and maybe the nation. That's a great vision to have. Let's get to that vision together. So why would one establish a public-private partnership? Well, there's a number of reasons. First and foremost, communities of all sizes have gone this direction. primarily because its approach to design and build and maintain transportation and solid waste and energy, and possibly even drinking water and wastewater infrastructure needs. But it's also an approach for local growth and improved quality of life. When small business owners and your local government can come together, that is a huge, huge opportunity to say, we all have an investment in the growth of our community and the quality of life for all people, especially our young people who are going to be living in the community in the future, right? And not just for those who live in the future, right? And live in the community right now, but also in the future. But lastly, it's an opportunity to create a wide range of strategies to finance and plan, and again, operate and construct public assets and deliver services. Last week I had the chance to attend the Code for America Summit, which is very focused on public servants like us, talking about how to make our local governments more data-driven and, more importantly, more delivery-driven. Because people right now, especially in the last year, are hurting. And what they're looking for our local governments to do to stay relevant, they're looking for us to be delivery-driven. And if we can find the opportunity to be delivery-driven for our people, for our constituents, we become more relevant, to be honest, than some of the corporations that want to maintain the relevance. So my hope is that our focus creates economic feasibility, leveraging local government resources, but of course, small business resources, and then of course, developing cutting edge development and green infrastructure. I used this slide in front of you, or I guess this link in front of you, and I'm happy to connect the link. It actually comes from the Environmental Protection Fleet Agency page. And it talks about financing green infrastructure, because if you're like me, you've probably heard a lot, well, it costs more to be greener. How many of you have heard that? It costs more to be greener. Our job as environmental leaders, especially elected officers, is to break that stigma down and to find an opportunity to include the community in our approach to combating climate change. And I want to use this slide as an example to show what that flow process would really look like. As you see here, you see the municipality. So let's talk about the city of Walnut Creek, right? For example, they'd have someone, I see my friend, Councilmember Darling on here, so I wanted to shout you out there. But they have an example where we pull together the municipality, the private developer, small business possibly, and they work together on a community-based private-public partnership to do a couple things. Upfront private capital that leverages public funding as well, aligned goals and common purpose. Again, here you see it, long-term commitment to maintenance sustainability. I think this is a big one because oftentimes when we hear, oh, this is a lot of money, people are thinking about the short term instead of how much it's going to be cheaper in the long term to be greener. And lastly, the driver of small business and economic development. And I like to add one thing to say, it's not just small business and economic development, it's workforce development. It's getting people jobs. It's getting young people to not go and do something that we don't like to do in your city after school, but actually do something that maybe teaches them some skills or teaches them responsibility or connects them better to the community, right? And of course, your local community is better with construction and maintenance and safety and design and inspection and materials, right? And you find an opportunity here in this big, broad chart. And I'd like this box to be a little bigger, but we'll let the EPA live for today. They're doing great work right now. But this part is critical. That community-based advisory board that leads you in that public-private partnership to align your goals and common purpose. So again, I'll put this in the link, but I did want to share that with you because I think this is a huge opportunity as elected officials to come together and think about how we can more broadly center ourselves around our work and what we need to do to combat the climate crisis, but also the role of our small business community in it. So thank you so much, Mark, Dr. Witzke, Linda, and Justine, and thank you all so much for attending the symposium. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Murphy. So on the topic of a public-private partnership, also of Green Business Council. Is there any questions from, I see questions? Or no, I see applause. I see the happy hands of applause for your presentation. So thank you, Devin. Thank you so much for that. I do see, oh, very good. So we do have a question from Linda Deschambault. Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I caught my eye the Green Business Council, and I have looked for a long time for a green chamber or a green chamber of commerce. I even paid for membership in one a few years ago and found out it had disbanded. I signed up online, and anyway, I'm just curious what is out there. We've got a very small business community in the town that I live in the town of Moraga. But we do have a chamber that's always active in trying to do stuff. And I think this is a topic that, you know, isn't front and center all the time. And I'm just curious, is there a Green Business Council? Is there a Green Business Chamber? Do you have any resources you could share with us?
So right now there is no Green Business Council, but there is, just like there is a Green New Deal, there's an opportunity to advance a Green Business Council, right? And part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation again was to really ignite that conversation together and that social action. In my case, I serve on the board with several of my colleagues here. Richmond Mayor Tom Budd, I see again, Walnut Creek City Councilor Cindy Darling, and we all sit on the MCE board, Clean Energy Board. And in many ways, this board also serves a number of services that kind of unite small businesses and also larger businesses to connect on programs relevant to energy efficiency, electric vehicle and charging infrastructure, energy resilience and battery storage. And it's really it's the best approach, I think, thus far I've seen a Green Business Council in our community, but it is not called as such. And I think it certainly serves a different, our chambers of commerce serve as a little bit more of support directly to small businesses than I may see MCE Clean Energy. But I did include the link in the chat box just in case anyone wants to know about their services or what other customer programs they have for both commercial programs and also small businesses as well.
Devin, I have a question.
Of course.
So if you were talking to sort of a ragtag environmental activist, like some of our friends, what language are they missing when they talk to the private sector, when they talk to particularly small businesses?
Yeah.
What gets lost in translation?
Can you clarify your question for me?
No, I can't, sadly. It's broad and vague, but
yeah.
I think that environmental activists and particularly small business owners, they talk past themselves, past each other when they're addressing their own concerns, environmental concerns, community-wise.
Yeah, I mean,
if my question is so vague that you can't answer it, go ahead and say it. It won't hurt.
I think what I'm hearing you ask is, if this was a what's the old school circles together, and you have the one circle here, the one circle here, where are people not communicating in that middle circle? It's a
Venn diagram.
Venn diagram. Thank you. I see Alex shouting me out, saving my life. I think what oftentimes misses is really youth workforce development. And I mentioned it several times on this in our talk, but I think what's missing is we talk about jobs, of course, for the just transition, because what we know is that there are a lot of people right now who work for oil refineries and fossil fuel companies, and those folks are going to have to, in order to save literally our planet, are going to have to transition. We also talk about the need to protect people in communities like Richmond and Brentwood, right? Because those people are being impacted by the development of fossil fuel infrastructure. We talk very little about the future of the people who are going to uphold this new system of clean energy that we need and we all want. The same people who are the refinery workers who learned their skills in craft. And so for me, I think youth workforce development is a critical conversation that is not being held together in the overarching conversation when it comes to clean energy and when it comes to particularly this issue of public-private partnerships. Because most folks think that community advisory board needs to be all folks over 18. And in my head, I'd love to see a 13-year-old. I'd love to see a 12-year-old. I'd love to see a high school student just starting their freshman year on a community advisory board that says, hey, we're working with this business in the city of Brentwood to do this, and your voice is important. And so if I can answer your question, that would be my answer to your question, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always love it when people say, yes, I understand your question better than you, and answer it in that way. Thank you, Devin, so much. Thank you. Brilliant as always. Thank you so much. So next up, I'm so excited to hear from our next speaker. I have heard about this person for so long from our friend, Professor Mark Stemmons, who is also a dynamic speaker and policy thinker in his own right. He talked up this person mightily to us here in the Bay Area. This person worked in coalition with young people, with students, and with her community. She co-authored the Chico Green New Deal. And I think it's instructive for all of us to hear about that journey and the challenges that it faced and the opportunities ahead for it. And we're so appreciative that she made the time to be with us. Please welcome Council Member for the City of Chico, Alex Brown. Alex.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I knew coming into this that I would be learning as well as delivering some insight to the folks in attendance. And all I have to say is that I wish, as I was starting this journey, I had something like this to convene with leaders and concerned policymakers about climate policy, because I think it is such an amazing foundation. I'll talk a little bit about what I did, but I think this really covers some of that for policymakers who are interested in investing in this issue. I'm Alex Brown. I'm a council member and former vice of the city of Chico. And I want to give some context about Chico since I'm hailing from the north about our community. Chico is a city of about 110,000 people. We have a university, Chico State, at the center of our community, and we are at the center of a very rural district. Butte County's very agricultural, very nature-rich area. And just, kind of for some political context, it's kind of an island of more progressive-minded or liberal folks, although our council switches every handful of years as well. So I would describe our community as sustainability-oriented, both on the business side. We're home to Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, Clean Canteen, Chico Bag, right? Some of these companies that are doing sustainability efforts, but also on the cultural side, we're a heavy biker community. We've got small urban farmers and a lot of outdoor enthusiasts. Now I just want to give you some personal context. As you're considering moving down this very worthy path of implementing climate policy, and particularly local Green New Deals, I'm educated as a social worker, and currently I'm a marketing consultant, right? So as I was entering this conversation, I knew I was not entering as an expert in climate policy. But I think as each of us are considering this fight and participating, we really have to lean on what our strengths are. And my strengths are messaging and people. And so as I was developing this policy, I leaned on those strengths and then brought other people into the conversation, right? As policymakers, I think our job, one of our primary jobs is convening, right? Not to be experts, but to get the right people in the room and learn from them, and then use our imaginations to kind of build off of that. So, when I was elected in 2018, of course, I was committed to environmentalism and sustainability, but it was also one of the topics I knew the least about from a municipal policy level, right? But then in 2018, 2 days after I was elected, we really became ground zero for the climate fight with the campfire that wiped out one of our neighboring communities, right? Caused by PG, but absolutely amplified the devastation because of dry fuels in our forests as a result of warming communities. And so that tragedy might be over, but the crisis and the aftermath certainly isn't. And I think it really informs us about the connection between climate change and housing, climate change and homelessness, climate change and economic development or financial sustainability, climate change and mental health and well-being, right? These are all issues that I think all of us can probably get behind as critical to the wellness of our community. And so as you are starting these conversations with members of your community, we do have to make that relevant, right? Clean air and a livable future, that should be a priority for all of us, but really making it tangible to your community, not only why this matters, but how we can plug into the fight, I think is really critical. So alongside my colleague, Carl Ori, who happened to be, this is a marketing thing, happened to be the oldest member of the city council while I was the youngest, really got together to author the Chico Green New Deal, which essentially outlines policy objectives and areas of focus that are relevant to our local community. I'm really glad to talk with you about those details, but given the limited time that I have, and we'll share the link in the chat as well, I want to talk to you about getting to the point of authoring it. And so, as I mentioned, one of the critical starting points as you're trying to absorb all this information and understand how you can formulate policy to align with your climate goals is to find experts, right? It's hard when you step up to take, as Devin mentioned, and several other people have noted, you step up to take these critical issues on, and we know as much as we know coming into that fight, right? Given where we've come from. And so, I leaned in to the idea that what I needed to do is surround myself with people who knew the things that I didn't know. So I guarantee, and obviously this virtual room is an example of that, there are plenty of people that are doing this work now. They're experts in your community. They know the local context. They're chipping away at part of the issue or a large part of it. And we need to tap in to that expertise, right? So they have their finger on the pulse of not only what's happening, but what's possible in your community. And as an individual or as a group of individual policymakers who are interested in exploring this, I think meeting with those folks and getting the good information from them about where the foundation already is critical. The next thing I want to, that I think is really important is reinforcing the foundation around climate policy in your community. So I call this like city infrastructure, right? Institutional infrastructure around climate action that helps you to plan that next step of your policy. And so I want to give you a few examples of what Chico has done to lay out that infrastructure. One, very easy to do. We declared a climate emergency resolution in the city of Chico. Essentially, it's a non-binding commitment recognizing climate change is real and that it has impacts on our community and that we're committed to taking action on it, right? That's something you could do right now. Just as a baseline, we get it, we're here, we're gonna show up to this issue. We established a formal climate action commission to lead this work. So that's a 7-person body, including experts on the issue. They meet every month. We have a dedicated staff member that staffs those meetings and their efforts. And one of their primary projects is to develop what we're calling Climate Action Plan 2.0, because we already have an original and now outdated climate action plan. And so we revisited it and really put some more power behind the second climate action plan, which is currently being vetted through the public and is set to come to the council pretty soon. It was developed in collaboration with city consultants who are kind of experts in municipal policy around climate action. Lots of public input weighing in. I know that previous speakers have mentioned how important it is to really coalesce the public around these issues. And really the end goal is it incorporates a lot of elements of the Chico Green New Deal that Carl and I wrote, but also a lot of issues that the community cares about that didn't end up in the Chico Green New Deal. So it's a really good combination of those items. I've heard people mention community choice aggregation, right? City of Chico is also part of community choice aggregation. And I want to lay up a little bit of context in case folks don't know what that is. Legislation was passed in California that allows local governments to participate in what's called community choice aggregation. Our local board is called Butte Choice Energy Authority. So what this really means in kind of layman's terms is we have control over our electricity. Communities form a board. They're made up of elected officials for any participating community. we are members of this board with the County of Butte and the City of Chico. PG&E still controls the lines and the transmission of the power, but the board gets to decide where we source our power, what kind of renewable resources that we invest in and that we source from, how much of that is local or not, and what kind of power mix we want to offer to our communities. So automatically right off the bat, you're offering a more renewable resources to your community, but you can kind of tier that so that they can choose 100% renewable, or we can head in the direction of 100% renewable for every single individual and business who participates in the program. This is huge and probably one of the most major things that a community can do. It lowers the cost of power for most residents. It allows residents and businesses to choose their power mix from somewhat renewable to fully renewable. It allows us choice in sourcing power, which means we can prioritize local projects, right? So if we have a ton of solar in the city of Chico, we have some hydropower in our region, in our county, we can create essentially an economy for renewable energy, which creates jobs and also starts to kind of influence that culture change and make this conversation about renewable resources a part of your culture. It allows you to create new programs that benefit low-income communities and might be unique to the needs of your community rather than some of the broader programs that are offered statewide. And it decenters PG&E, which, as we know, is a large corporation, and in our community, the cause of the fire in Paradise. And so that is, a way for us to take back some of the control over how we do things. Last thing I want to mention is identifying your greatest assets, right? So if you want to move this step forward, you really have to make it relevant to your local context. So it's a global problem, and a lot of people in our community, when they're pushing back on climate change, this is not immediately relevant, right? It's too expensive. It's not going to make an immediate impact on us. And so we have to tell them, yes, it is, and here's how. So I think a huge part of planning your local Green New Deal efforts is to consider the infrastructure you already have in place, just to name a few in our community. Farmers markets are huge. We have a ton of local agriculture that meets on several days of the week, and our community can source produce, vegetables, etc., from these local farmers. So one of our goals should be to expand those. One of our goals should make sure that we're lowering the barriers to entry for young farmers who are trying to get into the field, because one of the issues that we face in local agriculture is farmers are aging out and there's nobody to take their place because the barriers to entry are so high. We have a wastewater treatment plant. That's a huge piece of infrastructure that's almost entirely solar powered in our community, which gives us so much opportunity for reusing and recycling our water. We have a lot of local food and urban food initiatives going on in our community through a program called Butte County Local Food Network. I'll post a link to them as well in the chat. We have a university and a community college located right at the center of our city and county. They are already committed to sustainability initiatives, probably more so than maybe the broader community may be bought in. And so really leveraging those partnerships to do what Devin had mentioned, which is to get young people to want to stay in our communities and participate. We have to make it relevant to them. And we have a local workforce that's ready to be trained to do this work. Economic development initiatives. We have an award-winning economic development structure. There's a couple of teams, Team Chico and 3 Core, that are 2 critical economic development groups that meet regularly, are very, very tight knitted. And so making this relevant to those bodies and having them bought in a very similar way that Devin had mentioned is so important. And I want to just make a quick note here. When we passed the climate emergency resolution, we had one of the biggest hailstorms that we had experienced in the city of Chico, and tons of businesses in our downtown area flooded as a result of the downpour that was happening. So here we are talking about climate resiliency, talking about we're in an emergency, and literally as we're speaking, hail is dumping down on the roof of our council chambers, and one of our council members has to leave because her business is flooding, right? Like, how relevant could this be? And so I think as we're in those groups and really tailoring our messaging, we have to explain how this impacts local businesses, and also how local businesses can be the heroes of this fight in our community. And then, you can, I think that the low hanging fruit, which I know that Gail mentioned and a couple of other speakers mentioned, is creating policies that really allow us to walk the walk. So now that we have our CCA established, 100% of that energy that's running or electricity that's running to local facilities should be renewable. We should make that commitment, and that encourages other people to make that commitment. So that's our CCA is a little bit earlier in its development. We haven't gotten to the place of launching yet, but that's absolutely a priority for that next step. That's my spiel. So if there's any questions from you, I'd love to hear from you. And again, I'll post some links in the chat section as well.
Alex, that was excellent. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Edifying and inspirational. I'll go to questions. There was so much there, so much there. I have a question. As a messenger, as a marketer, what has been the message that works, that has persuaded? So people that maybe a little have anxiety, have doubts, what has been the message that has drawn them over to your side?
So here's the funny answer to that question. As a marketer, what I know is you have to tailor your message to different populations and different groups and different targets in a very different way, right? So that message to the economic development groups is going to be very different than your message to your sunrisers who are already on your side but want to help to move your initiatives forward. And so I'll start there. But here's what I'll say. I think using Green New Deal language is important. It allows us to adopt that framework that's happening at the national level. It allows us to innovate and use our imaginations. It also presents challenges. When you're talking about convincing people who maybe are on the fence or a little bit, unconvinced that this is critical, I think really reaching toward those economic development pieces of the puzzle and talking about how this maybe a costly investment at first, but there are ways to pay for it. And by the way, it's going to benefit long into the future economically. Here's how is really important. And then I think getting those experts that you already know have connections to those groups you're trying to reach to lead the conversation, to lead that introduction, and to help you integrate rather than showing up as if you are that expert is a really key piece. And honestly, make it look pretty. Again, like there's one thing that I can do, it's design something. And so that was one of the strengths I used. Make it pretty, make it accessible, make it conversational. This is not about us showing up into these spaces and saying, here's everything that I want to present. And it's really important, right? We have to tell that story. We have to connect it to things that people care about in a very emotional, real human way. And I think we have to show up with a lot of humility in that space, right? I'm not an expert. I'm just a person like you, and I'm trying to do my part and I'm trying to help. And here's some ways that I think that can happen. What do you think? So just a few pieces there.
Fantastic. We do have some questions. Laura Delaney, City of Martinez. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. That was a terrific presentation, Councilmember Brown. Congratulations on all your successes so far. It sounds like you're doing a terrific job. I was curious about what you think your greatest barriers or obstacles were along the way and how you overcame those.
Oh man, Laura, thank you so much. I will be so transparent with you in saying that we are currently experiencing our greatest barriers and obstacles. It is happening right here and right now, both on this kind of larger level in the form of COVID-19, which has stalled so much and hurt so many businesses. And my goodness, if you're talking about investing a bunch of money into these future problems that while our businesses and families and individuals are struggling so much, that's a big kind of messaging component that makes it really difficult to revitalize these conversations. But to be completely honest, our council flipped, right? So this shouldn't be divided on party lines. We should all care about this, and I think there are access points for anybody who's interested. But when you do have some of those party lines established, which we unfortunately do on our council, it's harder to convince folks of why this is important. And so just some of those kind of massaging those details to really find the things that we think benefit the vast majority of people, and that we can create an accessible message for moving this policy forward, right? The Climate Action Plan 2.0 has yet to come to council. It's coming to our council. I think it's great when you utilize consultants and outside agencies to really frame it for you and present the information to help make your case, because I think it can get pretty difficult when the politics come into play.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, and I guess one thing I'll add right now is, when the Paradise Fire, the Camp Fire occurred, many of you may know about 20,000 people flooded to the city of Chico to emergency shelters that were established here. And many of those people have resettled in our community. But what also accompanied that is an absolute skyrocketing in evictions and an absolute skyrocketing in home prices that's unlikely to change, right? So the kind of sub challenge of addressing climate change is addressing these issues that are related to it. And we're really in the heat of it right now, confronting homelessness and the homelessness that is the result of the Camp Fire and the people who fell through the cracks in the aftermath of the Camp Fire. And then this kind of housing boom that created economic opportunity for developers, but kind of has been very quickly leaving out the everyday worker and the young folks in our community who want to settle down here but are seeing no path to that.
Linda Deschambault, did you have your hand up? No.
Sorry, no, I took it down, but I see Sue kind of waving at the camera that might want to pipe in.
Sue, go ahead.
Sue Bach.
Sue Bach, go ahead.
You're
Go
on
ahead.
mute.
You need to unmute yourself, please.
Hey, Sue.
Hi. I went to Chico State.
Yeah.
Many moons ago, and I grew up in a small town near you, Corning.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly the types of people that you're having to deal with, and the resistance that there probably is still remaining for you to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
I now live in San Ramon in the Bay Area, and I am part of a committee who's trying to influence our city council here to take action. Apparently they have hired a consultancy out of Sacramento, which is great. The cost is about $1 million for that to happen. I am curious about where you got the economic resources to pay for this Green New Deal.
Sue, in progress, right? This has not been implemented. And here's what I'll say to that, right? I know that somebody's going to talk to us today about economic resources. And so I want to make sure that person has the opportunity to weigh in. But you have to start with the low hanging fruit, right? The things that maybe are more accessible to more people and less costly. And I think some of these implementing the institutional infrastructure is a real key step to that. The commissions, the resolutions, right? That kind of bottom line. And then typically councils are pretty willing to hire consultants. Butte Choice Energy Authority, CCAs, are ultimately a money maker, right? They bring revenue in addition to benefiting the community. And then the money that is made in those programs can actually be used for some of those initiatives that you're talking about. And then, I think the other key piece here is, fortunately in the state of California, there is financial incentive in the form of grants and other types of programs that have actually enabled us to move forward in a lot of different ways, from multimodal transportation to solar power, et cetera. And so I think you have to get creative in leveraging that, but you also have to have the idea in place and direct your staff to budget for it, or to kind of create the financial framework for it, so that we know what we're dealing with and we have solid numbers to address it. In the COVID-19 times, post-Camp Fire times, and frankly, the economic recession of 2008, we're still trying to recover from. Really difficult conversation to have. So you have to start with that low-hanging fruit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue, for that question. Very last question goes to Councilmember Devin Murphy. Devin.
Councilmember Brown, this was absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much. I've been waiting to hear from you, and it's just so great to be here. I had a question just because we're actually turning the tides here in Pinole, just talking about the issue of municipal broadband and just how it not only can be possibly an economic development driver, but also, obviously in terms of Northern California, it's been a huge issue. I'm wondering was that conversation integrated into this climate action? And if it was, how did you get to talk about it?
Yeah, Devin. So I actually probably have some resources to share with you. At our last city council meeting, it was our budget meeting. Staff actually presented or planted the seed. Staff brought this to us, right, about establishing a municipal broadband organization. And so they've done the research and actually brought it to us. And I'd be happy to share some of that with you if you'd like to see it, because they highlighted some of the economic benefits. They want it to happen, so they're making the case in a way that a council member doesn't really have to lead on. We just have to learn it and make sure that we're understanding the benefits so that we can make our case at the dais. So it's a new conversation. It's not something that's part of the Chico Green New Deal, but fortunately, it's being brought to us and integrated. And you're right, Northern California is one of the most hurt by lack of broadband access from an educational standpoint, all the way to businesses and economic development. And so I think we're starting to have that conversation, and we're right in step with you in terms of just beginning the dialogue.
Thank
you, Devin, for that question. And thank you, Councilmember Brown. You gave us a lot. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. I'll post some links in the chat for you for things I referenced as well.
Please do. That was excellent. We are now trudging along within time. We're doing great time here. We're going to now talk about what cities can do now. And we're going to talk about electric reach codes. Now, this is where we start getting specific, and this is where it gets exciting. We're going to be bringing up the sustainability manager for the city of Burlingame. She helped lead the charge of updating her city's climate action plan. And she will be discussing electric reach codes for new construction. Please lend an ear to Sigal Michael.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And I would like to start off by saying I've been just as inspired and excited by all the speakers. The energy here is really great to be part of. And I really hope that what I have to say about reach codes can actually be applied and be helpful to your cities. So I'll just start back to what a reach code is. You're most likely familiar with it, but it's basically that cities are taking it into their own hands to go beyond the building code, California's building code, for more strict local codes for energy efficiency, basically solar, electric appliances, and electric vehicle charging stations. So Burlingame, like many other cities in the Bay Area, has adopted reach codes. So I wanted to start, with why did we do it, and why it would be important for other cities to take on. First, many of you, and like Burlingame, were part of a community choice aggregation, just like the city of Chico explained it. And that sort of gives you the knowledge that your electricity is going to be on its way to be as green as possible. PG&E also has goals to be as clean energy as possible in the further future, but a community choice aggregation will help make it become happen sooner. So knowing that we are pushing for more to grow our electric usage, and knowing that electricity will be sourced from clean sources helps to complement the benefits of a reach code. Second is, I think of a reach code as future-proofing your city. Think of new development that comes into your city. If they're putting in natural gas, no matter what your constituents or city council or developers may think about natural gas, we can see the trend in the state is moving toward moving away from natural gas. So even if, I think using a natural gas stove may be excellent, or, it's still a lower emission than other fossil fuel usages, the trend is movement away from natural gas, which means it's going to be harder to supply and more expensive in the future. So by encouraging your new development today to go all electric, it's going to make it less expensive for them in the future to transition to all electric appliances or to move away from natural gas. So I really see, we're lucky in California that our green building code is ambitious and does push hard, but this REACH code pushes harder. And I think it's really sets a pathway for cities to go all electric in a steady pace that is achievable versus in the future having to, invest in transitioning buildings and retrofitting them from natural gas to all electric. So anyway, back to Burlingame. The other thing is we did not do this alone. Like maybe you and some council members on this meeting understand, like in our city, our council member does not like to do things that have not been vetted and tested in other cities. So we benefited from the fact that this was sort of a wave of dominoes that hit other cities, and we were part of that too. REACH codes happen in other cities such as Menlo Park and Berkeley and San Jose. So our Burlingame City Council could see that this is a trend that other cities have gone through and that we could do as well. And that also meant that the resources were available. Our community choice aggregation agency is called Peninsula Clean Energy, and they supplied staff reports and grant money and staff resources and this technical assistance to really help us go through this. And those resources are now available, through our staff report and through our experience to all of you. So to start off, here is our new community center that is coming into Burlingame. The REACH code did not apply to it, but it's still an all-electric building just because that was the goal of the city. It's going to have solar on the roof. It's going to have all-electric appliances, which means natural gas will not be used for heating, water, or air ventilation. And it'll also have electric vehicle stations. So, so everything in this, I think everything in this will be just all electric as a first for our city of an example of a project like this. Next slide, please. So to go into the nitty-grittiness of what our REACH code entails, for building electrification, it's all electric, but natural gas is allowed for cooking with pre-wiring in single-family homes. So this is just to show you, not all REACH codes look the same in cities. They're going to look different depending on what your city, what's really important. For example, in our city, natural gas for cooking was not, the council didn't feel it was necessary in multifamily buildings, but they felt it was necessary for single family residential. So it just, it depends what's important and how far you can push. For example, also in our city, we got a little stuck on fireplaces. Luckily, we were able to see past that and, ask for all electric, fireplaces in multifamily buildings, or no fireplaces, however it's done in the future. So it really depends where your city's at. Other cities, may have gotten stuck on different building types, such as life sciences or emergency service buildings, and also building size. So we decided, rather than go into the weeds in our REACH code, that if a building feels that electrification is not feasible, then they could, try and argue for that and write an argument to our chief building officer that would be considered. But overall, no exceptions are allowed except when applied for. And something that we were able to do in Burlingame that was exciting for us is to have the REACH code apply to renovations. Burlingame is mostly built out. Our housing stock is old, and most of the building happens by people purchasing houses and doing large renovations to them, either by completely demolishing and building a new one or adding a new floor, a new story. So we were excited to have the electrification apply for those large renovations too. For solar, we have a minimum solar system required for multifamily and commercial. The building code already requires that for residential homes, and that'll probably come down the line with the building code anyway. And then for EV infrastructure, in the current California building code, there's requirements to make buildings EV ready, which means that the EV charging equipment could be installed, whereas our REACH code is requiring for the charging equipment to already be there. So cars could already pull up and plug in. So all residential, single family and multifamily and commercial buildings need to have some degree of EV charging infrastructure. And I didn't list the details, but it's just different numbers for each one of them. But for an example, in multifamily, when I was talking about future proofing, we also want to future proof for EV infrastructure. So for multifamily, we wrote that 10% of the parking spaces need to have level 2. Well, what about as that grows and we wanted to have for every resident to have access? So we required that every parking spot have access to a level 1 charging outlet, which is just a regular charger, a regular outlet that you could plug into, so that people could use that overnight. It does charge your car, but we're also maybe seeing electric bicycles, electric scooters, other sources of electric transportation that may grow, that we want people to be able to plug into in their homes. Next slide. This slide is really meant to show you the process. I won't go into the details here. This will be shared, but it's a long process. There's, it's not you just bring a REACH code, the city council says great, and you go on. No, we had 2 study sessions. I had 2 public hearings until it finally got adopted. But I will say we started with a $10,000 grant from Peninsula Clean Energy, which helped us, buy into the program. But today, I don't believe it would be even necessary, because everything is laid out for us. We have PCE gave us a model staff report. There's presentations. There's the cost feasibility studies available. There's packets and what you need to submit to the California Energy Commission. All that is ready for a city who's just committed to the cause to take on. The place where you do need to spend time on is gaining support within your city. So we started with a study session to introduce the idea to our council members, and they came back to staff and asked us to get developers involved. So we held a couple meetings with our developers. We made sure there was a residential, a multifamily, and commercial developer. And Burlingame is small, so there was literally one of each of those in our meetings, and got them, understood their issues and where they would, what things are easy for them to buy into. For instance, no one has problems with EV infrastructure or solar, and what would be more difficult. And we brought that again to the study session, another study session, and the council urged us to move forward with an all-electric option, which means instead of giving developers an option to go, some cities had done, you can go all-electric or you can go with gas but extra efficiency, to not even offer that option of stay with gas and extra efficiency. They really bought onto the idea that we're setting up developments for the future, and we might as well go all electric as much as we could. And then finally, it went to a public hearing last summer, and was adopted. And then it just gets sent to, you send that packet of staff reports and ordinances and cost feasibility studies, which already existed, the California Energy Commission for review, and it's pretty easy from there. And today we're tracking progress to see which buildings this applies for and how they're handling it and any challenges that may arise.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
Sigal, last minute.
I'll go through this quick, just things to consider, things that's got a little stuck on us, but I just wanted to put it out there for people who are looking into. Reach codes is, such fireplaces, remodels, ADUs, flexible EV parking, indoor and outdoor kitchens. Flexible EV parking means we really, are going to be seeing more EVs in public parking lots. And those don't necessarily need to be exclusive for EV parking. That could be available for all parking lots so that we could grow the number of EV charging stations without having to limit the number of spaces. And then the last slide is just the list of resources to save and link to that you could find everything I've mentioned here. And on the Burlingame website, you just search by keyword or date and you could find our packet of information. And I am also available to help any city that's interested in moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sigal. Thank you. And this is the future. This is the future of every city. So get the experts, as Alex Brown said, the experts will present themselves. Grab them when they present themselves, and don't let go. Thank you for that presentation. Leads nicely to our next presentation on the issue of last year showed the vulnerabilities of California's energy grid with and also the future vulnerabilities of it, from climate disasters to sabotage. And so we're going to be talking now about microgrids. And to lead that discussion is the sustainability manager for the city of Fremont, where a lot of exciting things happen. Pleased to bring to the spotlight Professor Rachel DeFranco. Rachel.
Well, I'm not a professor, but thank you, Mark, for that title.
The rumors about you are false then.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a really great session, hearing from so many local electeds, and what your cities are doing and how you're understanding the ways in which our cities can take further action on climate. So, this is really rewarding for me to participate in as a staff member as well. I just want to quickly recognize that Fremont Mayor Lily May is also participating in the call today. And she has been, quite an advocate on our climate efforts in Fremont since she was elected in 2016. She's a participant in Climate Mayors, and if you all have not already joined Climate Mayors, I encourage you to do that. It's really a great way for mayors to be engaged on this topic. And then on the staff level, I just wanted to add that, I participate in a couple of groups where we share best practices and resources across cities. One is Green Cities California, and the other is the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, which is a US and Canadian network of local sustainability managers and directors within city and county governments. For those of you who maybe are not as familiar with Fremont, we're the 4th largest city in the Bay Area. Many know the first 3, and we've transitioned over the last half a century from being very agricultural nature into a large sprawling suburb, and now moving into what we've defined as a strategically urban, modern, sustainable city, as defined in our general plan that we adopted in 2011. I actually grew up in Fremont, and I've been working for the city since 2013, shortly after our first climate action plan was adopted, and have had the pleasure of serving as the city's first and still only dedicated sustainability staff person up until this point, and looking forward to actually being able to hire for a second person in the next fiscal year. Just before I jump into the microgrid project in particular, I wanted to say, a lot of the things that have been highlighted over this session are things that, Fremont has been considering or has done as well. We adopted REACH codes under the last building code cycle to require solar on new residential construction. We've been looking at, ways that we can really improve our streets for complete streets and protected bike lanes. We adopted a fossil fuel divestment resolution back in 2018, a carbon neutrality resolution in 2019, which is driving our climate action plan update that I'm working on right now, and a solar preservation ordinance to protect, existing roofs from shading of second story additions. And then there's a lot of projects that we worked on. And so the one that I'm going to highlight today is a really, great public-private partnership, which we, heard highlighted earlier, the importance of public-private partnerships with a clean tech firm in Fremont called Gridscape Solutions. So next slide, Justine. So this project was a project that was funded under a California Energy Commission grant that was awarded directly to Gridscape, a local Fremont clean tech firm, to demonstrate microgrid systems on critical facilities. So they reached out to the city of Fremont, said, we'd love to, partner with you guys on this project. We think that, solar plus battery storage with this complex microgrid controller would allow your critical facilities to provide energy even if the grid is down, and on an operational basis help you save money and get clean energy to those facilities. And we'd love to do this in our own backyard. The fire station 11, which a mock-up is shown here, is actually just down the street from Gridscape's headquarters. And so this is really a way for us to have clean energy generation plus operational resiliency for critical facilities. And I just want to add that this project started in the idea formation process back in 2015, long before we started to experience public safety power shutdowns under PG&E. Next slide. So I'm not going to go into the details here, but this was substantially funded by the Energy Commission grant, and Gridscape put in some of their own capital to really develop their microgrid controller system, which allows batteries and solar PV systems to seamlessly communicate with each other and with the building and with the grid. And so, the benefit for us was to really have, operational resilience for our facilities, plus energy cost savings and clean energy. And these systems are relatively small in nature compared to some other microgrid systems you might have heard about. We're really looking at it just a facility level microgrid and not community scale microgrid. So 40 kilowatt solar PV systems paired with a battery storage unit of around 100 kilowatt hours. Next slide. So the fire stations are located at 3 different city facilities, 3 fire station facilities. We have 11 fire stations in Fremont, and we looked at kind of where we had the best solar access, as well as which facilities had the highest energy load. And you can see here I have the base price for electricity that we were paying back in, I think this is 2016 or 2017 to PG&E, and those rates have actually gone up since then. Next slide. So the way the microgrid works is that we have, solar carport that is connected to the building. And, traditionally with solar, you would have what's called net energy metering, where you generate energy, use it in your facility as much as possible directly from your PV. If you're generating extra energy, it feeds into the grid and you get credits for that you draw upon later. With the battery system integrated in a microgrid controller, then when there's excess generation, it goes into the battery rather than directly to the grid. And then that stored energy can be pulled upon later when the solar isn't producing as much energy as needed by the building. What we've done in these designs for our microgrid systems is always maintained at least a 25 to 30% charge in the battery at any given time, so that we have at least 3 hours of stored energy for islanding in case the grid goes down. And then we're able to utilize the rest of that battery, 3/4 of the battery, for kind of energy arbitrage and making sure that, we're reducing our demand charges from the grid, and we're using our local energy produced by the solar as much as possible within sort of a closed loop, and not having to rely on PG&E essentially as our quote unquote battery for sending excess energy to and pulling it from. Next slide. One of the ways we were able to do this as a public-private partnership and not have to go out through a public bid effort was to rely on this California government code that I have listed here, 4217.10. It allows public facilities to sole source for energy services contracts as long as you can demonstrate that the savings generated by those systems will outweigh the upfront costs or the costs over time. And so this is a really important piece of government code for anyone who's looking to do projects like this, because then you can get a little bit more creative in terms of finding the right opportunity that makes sense for the city, and specifically in our case, being able to pull in grant funding to do this. We also, on the city side, worked with Gridscape to come up with a power purchase arrangement. So they were able to go in and install the systems on our city facilities at no upfront cost to the city, and then we pay for the energy generated by those systems over time under a power purchase arrangement. And what we're paying for the energy generated by the systems is about half of what we used to be paying to PG&E for the same amount of energy generated. Next slide. You can see here just a summary of kind of estimated project savings over a 10-year period of time for these systems. And this is just based on, that drop in cost for kilowatt hours of electricity produced. It doesn't actually take into account any additional reductions that we may have seen by offsetting peak demand charges from PG&E. And some of you may be aware that actually in the last year, PG&E has been transitioning both commercial facilities and residential facilities to a time of use rate. And what that means is on the commercial side, more facilities are experiencing peak energy costs. So when you're using energy during high demand times, you're actually paying more per kilowatt hour. And this is regardless of whether or not your jurisdiction participates in a community choice energy authority, which the city of Fremont does. We're part of East Bay Community Energy. The tariffs are still part of PG&E, and we still pay transmission and distribution charges to them. Next slide.
Final minute, Rachel.
All right. So quickly, benefits to the city. We have been able to protect these critical facilities from power outages by having these microgrids with, at least a couple hours of energy islanding available in that stored battery capacity. If that battery is fully charged, we can actually get between 8 to 12 hours islanding, and Gridscape has tested that at our facilities over the course of this project. And as I mentioned, we can reduce the demand charges that we would see from the grid. We increase our community resiliency, our ability for these critical fire station facilities to respond to any emergency events in our community. We've reduced our utility bills significantly. We've cut our greenhouse gas emissions. And ultimately, we've really helped support the local clean tech company, Gridscape, and help advance innovation in our community. Fremont is home to over 50 clean tech firms, and we really like to work with them as much as possible to help them continue to develop and bring to market some of the technologies that they're developing. And this is a testament to that. Gridscape started as a team of about 6 or 7 folks when we started this project back in 2016, and now they have over 40 staff and have been able to contract with quite a few public and private agencies across the state for similar microgrid systems. Next slide. I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can see in this pie chart that 2/3 of the energy produced on this snapshot of a day back in 2018 was from solar. But then another 28% of the energy used by the building was actually pulled from the battery, and only 5% of the energy used by the facility was actually pulled directly from the grid. And that happened in the kind of late night hours before we started to recharge the battery with solar generation. Next slide. Okay, so this is the overhead picture of the carport structures at Fremont Fire Station number 6. Next slide, I think, has a picture of the microgrid controller. This is at the same facility. You can see there's a number of units here. The big tall one is the battery system. And that was actually produced by Delta Products, another Fremont-based clean tech firm. And then the microgrid controller and the auto transfer switch and everything is next to that. Next slide. All right, and there's my contact information, and hopefully I made time. So.
Thank you, Rachel, so much. Microgrids, we need them on every single school, every single hospital, every single fire department station. Thank you so much for that presentation. Really appreciate it. Going forward, we are going to be hearing from our friend Justine Bird again, author of this fantastic book. I swear I'm not her book agent, but this is such a great tome full of great programs, and we're going to hear about circular economy. Justine, I hand it over to you.
Mark, what do you think about 2 to 3 minutes for my section? Would that work?
Yeah, cut the tree limbs.
Get it down a little bit.
Yes.
I just mainly wanted to share 3 quick stories with you all about circular economy jobs, because when we talk about the Green New Deal, we often hear about clean energy, decarbonizing buildings, decarbonizing transportation. But you know what? When organic materials like wood and food and paper rot in landfills, it rots into methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. So I just want to encourage you also to think about circular economy options. So we primarily have a linear economy where you extract materials, manufacture them, use them, and throw them away. And we really want to be looking more at reducing, reusing, recycling, composting. And here are 3 quick examples. The city of Portland passed an ordinance in 2016 saying if you want to tear down a house that was built before 1916, because they were seeing hundreds of old Victorian houses demolished, smashed, pushed over into a dumpster and hauled to the landfill. And they said, no, you can't throw away solid oak wood flooring and this old growth timber framing beams, kitchen cabinets, wood doors, clawfoot tubs, porcelain sinks. We want you to salvage it. We want you to deconstruct it, salvage it. And they offered grants for a year, $2,500 per project to cover the cost differential between deconstruction and demolition. And they did a training for 14 people, 2 of whom were right out of prison, 7 of whom were homeless, and the rest had entry-level skills. And we trained them on how to do deconstruction and then put them out on job sites. 2 new companies started up as a result doing building deconstruction, and it's been a very successful program. Second example, I'm hearing feedback. Could you put yourself on mute if you're... Okay, second example is tool lending library. Just quickly, City Berkeley started a tool lending library in 1979 with a $30,000 community development block grant so that low-income folks could borrow tools. Wouldn't it be great if every one of the 482 cities and towns in California had a tool lending library where people could borrow construction, landscaping, woodworking, even kitchen tools? The ice cream maker and the air fryer are the most popular kitchen tools that Berkeley loans out. This could be a wonderful community resource. And if each city and town hired 2 full-time people, that would be almost 1,000 green jobs. And the third example I want to share with you is that SB 1383 is where the state has set a goal that by 2025, that California will divert 20% of the edible food that is currently going to landfills, but could be diverted to feed people. And at a time when 1 in 4 Californians are food insecure as a result of COVID, it just doesn't make any sense to throw away edible, surplus prepared food, edible food, when it could be going to people. So this is a quick example. Replate is a nonprofit in San Francisco. They charge $40 to pick up, and that money goes to pay Matt Stepanovich, who goes and drives and picks up 10 trays of food or more at a time and drives it to a homeless shelter where it can be consumed. So I just wanted to give you all a few examples of projects that would create green jobs that will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and give people meaningful work. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Justine. We have a few moments for 2 questions, and let's, with the round table, anyone can offer an answer. First question I would like to put out there is from the chat, from Adrian Rice. And the question is, here you have a lot of green job opportunities. What ways are cities creating pathways to include marginalized and communities of color that are disproportionately impacted by climate change and bringing them in this growing green economy? And I open that up for anybody to answer. This is not a good answer. Well, I'll throw something
Here's what
out.
I'll say. I'm actually just going to make a comment to this. I think the silence is very telling here because implementing equitable policy is really challenging to get our heads around and to figure out, right? That's the highest level of equity that we can do, is making sure that communities who have been marginalized and disenfranchised throughout our history have an opportunity to participate. But the action items associated with that, I think, are really difficult to manage. And what I'll say is this: I think the more that we're prioritizing young people, particularly keeping those young people in our universities, in our communities, right, which often, at least in the county of Butte, the city of Chico, bring a huge amount of diversity to our local communities. I think by extension, we're doing that, but we really do have to work with the organizations that are connected to those communities to ask them, how do these communities, what makes sense for these communities to be included? How do these communities want to be included? And not pretending that we know the answer to it. I think we have to create access points for communities to participate in making those plans and implementing them. So like I said, I think that the silence is, it's because we're still trying to figure that out. And I think we figure that out by being inclusive of those communities in the conversation as we're developing that policy.
Mark, can I share a quick story? I just wanted to share that it was really interesting to me to learn that California spends about $80,000 a year to keep people locked up, and the recidivism rate is 66%. When people are released from prison, those who have felony records, about 66% end up reoffending. And that number drops, that recidivism rate drops to 8%. It's if the person coming out of prison is able to get a job that pays at least $10 an hour. So it's in our best interest to create more green jobs, even just building new construction, even taking 10 trays of food over to a homeless shelter. If you pay minimum wage, that person's less likely to end up back in prison, for which we pay $80,000 a year. So I think there's a real opportunity to grow the number of green jobs so that people have a chance to support themselves and their family.
Yes. So I always hear talk in the nonprofit world about bringing people to the table and all this kind of stuff. You include people economically. All means all. And you make sure that they're included on the economic level, not just the rhetorical, hey, I see you over there. No, make sure they're getting paid. Make sure that they have a job. Make sure they're supporting their family.
So
is there any other questions in this round?
I was just going to make a comment regarding the education programs. Sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm Mayor Lily May from the city of Fremont, and I wanted to let you know about some of the programs that we've worked on. Formerly, I was on the school board, and I know that with our Mission Valley ROP, we presented and had opportunities for the students to be able to engage in education on green environmental programs and certificated programs in partnership with Ohlone College. And that was one of the programs that we offered. But more importantly, you were just talking about the opportunity to be able to have ability to earn and learn at the same program. And I just wanted to share real quickly that we recently just completed our first pilot of the ELF program. And that's exactly Earn and Learn Fremont. It was a holiday theme kind of, but it was 8 weeks of certificated program that we took 21 individuals where they were impacted by the COVID, whether loss of jobs through retail. We also had a person who was a veteran, a person who was a waitress, and also a person that was formerly unhoused. And we were able to bring them in for 8 weeks and provide a starting salary of $18 an hour. And we had on-site training and certificated smart manufacturing. And at the end of that graduation, I'm pleased to be able to share of the 17 who all graduated, all 17 have jobs and their starting salaries are between $26 and $28 an hour. So we would love to be able to pilot that and roll that out in other cities and be able to work with others. And my other some other chairs or hats that I wear. I also happen to be a chair for the Mayor's Task Force on Education for National League of Cities. So we're hoping to be able to share those with others and with 900 manufacturers here in the Bay Area. And I apologize, I've been popping in and out. We also had a East Bay EDA, and we're talking about food, the future of food. And so some of the things that I'd like to share, I also heard Justine, and nice to see you. It's a very small world. I've known Justine, our sons were friends when they were little, a long time ago now, because my son and hers are 20. But we certainly would love to share that we have one of our companies here that does biodigesters, and they manufacture them here. They not only provide them, but they actually manufacture them here in Warm Springs, and they are scalable from everything from the ones that you'd see at a business, small restaurant, to the ones that are used on cruise ships. So, I mean, especially because that was one of the concerns a couple of years ago with articles where people were dumping some of their waste into the ocean. And so those are just some of the initiatives and efforts that we would love to connect. And I know everyone's focused on AB 1383, so that would be a good way to look at that. And sorry for interrupting. Have a great day.
Oh, splendid, splendid. Thank you so much for that. One last question. No? Well, in the interest of time, since we're running a little bit over as expected in these things, I want to give credit to Dr. Vitska Medema for helping organize this event, and also being for such a mover and shaker in terms of environmental policy in the Bay Area. And also, I'm going to bring up another person I'd like to thank, and who's going to make some statements, make some closing remarks. Co-founder of Generation Green and co-founder of Contra Costa County Climate Leaders. She is certainly a climate leader herself. Former mayor of Moraga, the one, the only, Linda Deschambault. Linda Deschambault, give us our closing.
Hey, everybody. I think we're already starting to lose some people, and I'm very appreciative of your time. And I just want to thank everyone so much for spending a couple hours with us today, particularly our electeds, our speakers, our organizers, Mark for hosting. I think you did an excellent job getting us through a full agenda. Definitely respect your time as a former mayor and council member myself. And as Devin said, it is more than overwhelming when you have a full-time job during the day, and then you try to scurry off as a volunteer to meet and serve up at the dais as an elected official till late in the night. And how on earth can you prepare for anything besides barely police, fire, and roads? And yet all of these things are gigantic. And we've seen today how police, fire, and roads are all under the umbrella of a Green New Deal, and even how it's essential. I mean, how technology is going to get us there, like with the microgrids and keeping our buildings off. So the intent of these workshops is we've done over 24 of these rather than run for another term. The intent for me was to try to be a resource, a network for other elected officials, truly a forum for convening the policymakers, all of you who made this today. And of course, today's topic is so important and so all-encompassing. You know, this Green New Deal, the term, whatever you call it, it's where we're all at right now. We're building back better. We've all been hit hard economically. And it's really at the city level where we feel it the hardest. And it's really at the city level where we can really make the most difference. We're the ones at the city level. You're the ones at the city level working on the local work, the local jobs, the local economy. And that's our answer. But our format today wasn't intended to give you all the answers. It's really intended to allow you to get some quick sound bites, see really what's going on, see the optimism that's out there, hear from cities that are working on these issues and making it work. And so the goal is at the end of this short presentation is to let you get back to your job. I see we're already losing a few people, and give you the choice to explore the items that you found interesting or compelling today. Use the contacts we've given you. We will follow this up with presentations, and everything will be saved on a website with links and information and resources, ideally a fact sheet with links to everything you've seen today. Your agenda did have the policy speakers contact information provided, but we'll provide that again. So all I can say is just thank you so much for everything and everybody else is doing out there. And if there's something you heard about today that you want to know more about, I ask you right now in the last couple minutes before we close this meeting, could you please put in the chat something you might have heard about today that you would like to see another workshop on, something something next. I mean, we've done workshops on everything from plastic bag bans or onward. I mean, one thing that was mentioned really briefly by, was it Rachel? I'm losing track, you guys. The power purchase agreements, PPAs was thrown out there, or CCAs was thrown out there. If there's something that you would like to know more about or see another workshop on, let us know. Maybe a workshop just on reach codes or just on microgrids. So in the meantime, all the policy materials that you've seen today, we're going to be posting that, and links to everything that you need. So I just want to say thank you again to everybody. I thank all of you. Every single person on this call is a climate leaders. Often people ask about our name, and that we're not the leaders. Contra Costa climate leaders aren't leading the way. We're just a network to feature and bring together the leaders. And I think we've accomplished that today. So thank you all for everything you're doing, for being leaders, for making our communities more sustainable, and for future generations to come. So thank you for spending time with us. There'll be more information, and I hope you enjoy your day. And I don't know, Mark, if you have any other closing statements, but look forward to seeing you all out there making a difference in the world.
Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to everybody who attended. Let's keep this conversation going. You're all splendid. This is a big task where nobody's alone, as Dr. Vitska said. We're all doing this together. We're all helping each other. Thank you again, all the speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks,
so much,
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.